The case of Ahmaud Arbery has gone down in the annals of the history of the United States of America as one of the cases that is mostly cited as examples for racially triggered crimes perpetrated by some people. Now, this case occurred in 2020, but its relevance cannot be overstated, more so as in recent times where the people who were accused and convicted of the demise of Ahmaud Arbery are now seeking to appeal the decision and have it overturned, but I'll put out a video on that after this one. Today's true crime story is going to look into the 7 minutes of horror that this young black man by name Ahmaud Arbery allegedly had to endure at the hands of 3 white folks who claim that they mistook him to be a burglar, whilst on the flip side of things, the other side is also claiming that it was a racially motivated crime which led to the unfortunate unaliving of Ahmaud Arbery. But I'm going to chronicle the details of how the events unfolded and the timelines of how things played out, and you would see how 7 minutes can end up changing someone's life around the wrong people who obviously moved into action based on the wrong reasons. Now, the whole thing started in February of 2020, where Ahmaud Arbery, a 25-year-old young black man, was running not for leisure or exercise, but would end up running for his life instead. Initially, you would see Ahmaud Arbery on a surveillance video wandering into an open construction site in the Glenn County neighborhood. Now, this would seem a bit normal. There are people moving around in neighborhoods, and this was a construction site, so someone could go in there for one reason or the other. But then, not long after Ahmaud Arbery enters the construction site, a neighbor is seen on camera standing on the front lawn of the house right across the street from this construction site. Now, further records will show that this neighbor would go on to call 911 and complain that there was a guy in the unfinished home, which is rightly so. There is a guy in the unfinished home, and that is Ahmaud Arbery. But what can be inferred from he being in this unfinished home? And that is where it seems things got out of hand, because video again shows Ahmaud Arbery would run out of the house and past the neighbor as he's on the phone with the dispatcher. As to why Ahmaud Arbery decided to run out of the house, this was yet to be known as to what triggered him to rather run out of the house instead of maybe stroll or walk out of the house. Now, at this point in time, the neighbor was still on phone with the 911 operator, and then he told this 911 dispatcher that there this guy is going, there he goes. So, at this point in time, it was as though we've called 911 on you and now you are running. So, this started the final run of Ahmaud Arbery, which he wouldn't finish, unfortunately, alive. This person goes on to say, as the neighbor, that although he did not clearly determine whether Ahmaud Arbery had actually stolen anything from this construction site, his instinct or gut feeling told him that Ahmaud Arbery was responsible for the thefts that had occurred in the neighborhood. And this is where the racial profiling begins to be alleged in this case, because first of all, this guy went into a construction site. As to whether he was supposed to be there or he had credentials to be in there, I can't say, and it's not been clearly determined, but it's obvious he wasn't one of the construction crew. So he went in there, fine. He called 911. That is good neighborly thinking, some would say. The guy comes out and starts running, or he runs out. Now, like I said earlier, It's not yet established why he decided to run out and run away. But despite all this, you haven't been able to clearly determine that he has stolen something. But you are saying that your instinct or gut feeling tells you that he was responsible for the thefts in the neighborhood. So you are not just talking about that moment where you probably suspected he might have stolen something. It's even going further to assume that he has been responsible for other thefts that were occurring in the neighborhood. Now the question is why? You haven't even established an initial theft in the first case, not to talk of extending it to other thefts that have happened in the past. But this was what this neighbor did. And this neighbor was none other than Greg McMichael. Now, McMichael went back into his home. And at this point, he told his son, Travis McMichael, who he saw running past their house. Greg McMichael then grabbed his Glynn County Department issued pistol. And then his son also grabbed a pump-action shotgun. And they left their driveway in Travis's truck in the direction Ahmaud Arbery was running. So just like that, they had turned themselves into citizen vigilantes. And this was going to escalate further into a form of mob action instead of a possible citizen's arrest. So Ahmaud Arbery, realizing this, also intensified the speed. And this is on video. Just that for the sake of YouTube graphic policy, I can't show everything, but you see some of it playing through the course of this video, and you see Ahmaud Arbery on the last run of his life. Unfortunately, they caught up with him. Now, at this point in time, Ahmaud Arbery had run for quite some time, but the question was, McMichael and his son are in one truck, pursuing Ahmaud Arbery down the road. So then the question is, who shot the video? Because the video was shot from behind the truck being driven by this father and his son, who are pursuing Ahmaud Arbery. I'll let you know as we go on, because it turns out it wasn't just these two. There was a third person, and he was the one shooting the video, and he was following behind the truck being driven by this dad and his son in pursuit of Ahmaud Arbery. Now, this third suspect was a man known as William Roddy Bryan, and this is how he got to join the whole incident. So when Ahmaud Arbery is still being pursued by the McMichaels, he runs past the house of Bryan. Now, Bryan witnesses this chase and shouts out to ask the McMichaels whether they've got him. And whilst he yells to ask this question, he doesn't get a response back. So the next thing he decided to do was to get back into his house, get the keys to his car, and also set out following the pursuit of Ahmaud Arbery. But then he decided to film the whole thing. And that would end up being one of the videos that chronicled the final moments of Ahmaud Arbery, unfortunately. Or in the case of the prosecution, fortunately. Because the pursuit lasted for some few minutes, after which the McMichaels pulled up to corner Ahmaud Arbery, and then the rest that pursued is something that was very unfortunate, because they took aim at him with their weapons and in the process ended up unaliving him. Now, this case got the needed attention it required, I believe, as far as the public was concerned. There were some allegations that initially the video that would provide evidence for what had transpired so far to either corroborate the stories out there or the defenses being perpetrated by the McMichaels was seemingly a bit hard to get. So this made the case drag for some time. But then, eventually, the prosecution got their hands on the video. And in this video, you would see that when the McMichaels cornered Ahmaud Arbery, they got out and there seemed to be a struggle over the weapon that they had, because Ahmaud Arbery realized that just like that, he had to fight for his life. But unfortunately, he lost that fight, given the fact that he was actually outnumbered by these men. So, in the end, the court had to step in and try this case. And this was where the black community also showed its strength, because in as much as this had happened to just one person, it was actually being interpreted mostly by the community that it was an attack on them all. And if it's actually a racially motivated crime, I agree, because an injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere. And it's not just because it's against a black person. Once it's racially motivated, it could be against any race or color, depending on where the situation is playing out. So this case went to court, and here were the charges that were leveled against these three men, being the McMichaels and then Bryan. So the first charge was malice murder, then 4 counts of felony murder, 2 counts of aggravated assault, false imprisonment. Of course, that was false imprisonment, what they did, and then criminal attempts to commit false imprisonment, and the violation of the oath of a public officer, obstruction of justice, interference with rights, attempted kidnapping, using a firearm during a crime of violence. And it was just obvious in these 7 minutes what they had done had a tall list of charges that were embedded in their actions. And the law didn't hold back, because in the end, Travis McMichael was given a life imprisonment sentence without the possibility of parole, plus 10 years. Now, it was also an add-on of 20 years being added by the state. Now, Gregory McMichael was given life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, plus 7 years, and then plus 20 years by the state. And William Bryan, the third accused, was given 35 years in prison by federal, life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 30 years. So, it's worth mentioning that when this case first broke and the video shot by William Bryan eventually came out, it seemed like William Bryan was actually the hero who had videoed the crime on camera, which was going to serve as evidence to bring the McMichaels to justice. But over the course of the investigation, it would turn out that he himself was implicated in the crime. But unfortunately, in all this, the biggest victim here was Ahmaud Arbery. And this is where it hurts me the most, because after all is said and done, the life is lost and we can't bring it back no matter what the sentencing is. And my heart goes out to the family of Ahmaud Arbery and all his loved ones. Granted that these charges were leveled against this man despite some seeming delays that some people were not happy about, and the subsequent sentencing of these men that followed, it seemed like justice had been served to an extent where at least the family could find some form of closure. But then, as is their right, these 3 men, after serving almost 4 years, are now back in court in 2024 trying to have their decision overturned by the Supreme Court. Like I said, I'm going to bring you a video after this one that seeks to talk about the specifics of the claim that they are making now. And I don't know if I should say it's unfortunate. It's their legal right. But again, if the emotion is brought into the conversation, you would realize that it is not something that is going to be easy for the family and loved ones of Ahmaud Arbery. Because they have lost their loved one. And at the end of the day, the best chance at justice they could get is what they got. Or let me say, the best chance at legal justice that they could get is what they got in court. So if that ends up being overturned, then it would feel like they have been hard done. But again, if the Supreme Court also looks at the appeal of the convicted 3 men on its merit and deems that there is ground for the Supreme Court to also overturn, then the Supreme Court also needs to overturn it because it's also their legal right. And this is where it becomes a difficult thing, because it's as though eventually, irrespective of how the decision goes in court, somebody is going to be at the short end of the stick, at least when you look at the emotions that will follow after that decision. And I don't know how it's going to play out. But then, this is just one example. There's the case of George Floyd and other cases. And I'm hoping that we will get to a point in this world where the color of somebody's skin wouldn't be what would influence or trigger certain reactions towards this person, which others would feel are warranted just because of the color of that person's skin. I don't think that is fair to anybody, be it black, white, brown, yellow, or whatever. We all are one people, and we all need to love each other. Subscribe to the channel if you are yet to do so. Turn on the post notifications. What do you think about this case? If you are somebody of a dark skin in anywhere in the world, let's know what you are facing, if any. If you are somebody of any other skin, if you've had any form of racial encounter, let's know. Let's have a discussion on this. And if there's something else I left in this case, don't hesitate to let me know in the comment section. Thanks for following. Stay safe out there and keep an eye out. I'll catch you on the next one.